to be invited to the National Stewards Network Conference. As the Chair said, I'm a black members rep on the Unison National Executive Council, but here speaking in a personal capacity. I represent thousands of black members in Unison in the workplaces, but I'm also a Unison branch secretary in a local government branch and represent all members in the local government branch. And my remarks are really going to be around the far-right riots and the violence we've seen in our streets across the UK in the summer months. And all our members, especially black members, were shocked by the riots and the violence attack on refugees, migrant workers and black workers. We had a branch meeting, local branch meeting, to discuss this, and many black workers were really shocked and angry and really felt threatened by the fascists and the racists. Even the local council held listening circles about this, and older workers said it was reminiscent of living through the 1970s and the attacks of the National Front at that time. And although there are many who, felt despair and anger and felt that society was going backwards in regards to racism. But we also say, and they were heartened, and saw the other side to that, when thousands of local workers and the community came out to defend and stand against the racists and the right wing and the fascists. We've seen, communities like 10,000 people in Walthamstow, and the ordinary workers in the community fighting against the fascists. And even in Brighton, we saw thousands come out saying, we stand with our community, and these are our streets, not the fascist streets. Whose streets? Our streets. And people felt heartened by that. We're in solidarity with refugees and migrant workers and defending our communities. But we can see, as people have said, the rise of the far right and the right across the UK and across Europe. Just recently in Germany, we saw the far right gaining. And Unison at the Congress has a motion condemning the rise of reform with 4 million votes in the last elections, warning about the danger they pose, dividing the community with their politics of hate. And the motion correctly says that we must fight, we must support campaigns and demonstrations by anti-racist organisations and communities, which of course we must do. But I think it should have gone further to say that really the trade unions should be leading and be central to that fight. Because fighting in the workplace and on the streets, making sure that demonstrations are properly stewarded by trade unionists. We should be playing a central role, because we know that it is not the fault of refugees and migrant workers about our poverty wages, driving down of wages, cost of living crisis, collapsing living standards, lack of affordable houses, crisis in the NHS, and the myriad of issues and social problems that are in the UK. Cuts in council funding. But unfortunately, all the mainstream political parties, including the Labour Party, are blaming refugees for these problems, talking about migrants in small boats, and even Starmer recently had a disgraceful attack on Bangladeshi workers, saying it's their fault, and you must stop them coming over. And of course, we've already talked about the right-wing media constant attack for years, for really decades, on refugees and migrant workers. But as we know as trade unions, it is the neoliberal capitalist system is the cause of the collapse of our living standards. And they're responsible. And the big bosses still making fat profits are to blame. And unfortunately, the Tories and now even New Labour continuing with the austerity on behalf of the rich, making workers pay. And that's, who to blame for the collapse in our living standards. But for the past couple of years, the trade unions have been fighting back against austerity. We've seen a wave of strike action with thousands of workers fighting, in trade unions, fighting for higher pay, fighting to stop the attacks of the bosses on that, really trying to halt the collapse in our living living standards and the cost of living crisis. A fight back against austerity will undermine the poisonous division of the far right and reform. And we know that is urgent. We know the role of racism and discrimination in the workplace to try and divide and rule workers to continue to drive down our wages and to drive down our living standards. That is the role of racism and divide and rule against any discrimination. And really it's only the trade unions in the workplace can unite all workers, can unite all sections of the workers against the bosses, trying to drive down our wages. And we can see it when we come together fighting fighting for higher pay, fighting against the tax. We see us coming together on the picket lines. We can see that when we're working together, fighting together, that's how we're uniting all sections of the working class. And we need to clearly and urgently fight against austerity and these social conditions such as bad housing, cuts to services. And in 2018, the TUC passed a motion, Jobs and Homes Not Racism, and we really need now to enact that. We can't leave it on the shelf like a shiny medal. Oh, that's a really good motion. That looks really great over there. We have to actually enact it. Make sure it's not just words. Because we can only cut across the far right and bring people towards us instead of racism when we fight the conditions that causes racism and discrimination. We need to play that central role. Too often, the trade unions really try to, put that role onto other organisations, other anti-racism organisations, to play that leading role. We as trade unions have to play that leading role. Yes, we're bringing all the anti-racism organisations together, bringing the communities together, as I said, we did in Walthamstow, in Brighton, but we as the trade unions have to play that central role, and we must agree to that. And that is why my local branch passed a motion, not just saying we're playing a central role, but passed a motion saying the trade unions must call a national demonstration against the far right, but for jobs and homes and services, not racism. We make sure we link the fight against racism to the social conditions, to the fight against austerity. We have to link those two together because that's the only way we're going to undermine the far right, get rid of undermine reform and the fascists, is when we link those together, the social conditions and the fight against racism. So this week, we have to say that the trade unions must act, the TUC must act its policy of jobs and homes and services, not racism, and call that national demonstrations as the beginning of the fight back against the far right and reform, and that's the way forward. Thank you.